You know that feeling. You have been talking to someone for a few weeks. Things feel okay, maybe even good. And then, without any real explanation, the energy shifts. The texts take longer to come back. The plans get vaguely canceled. And suddenly, you find yourself doing something you swore you would never do again. You are overanalyzing every single word they type. You are shrinking your needs to make yourself easier to love. You are waiting. You stare at your phone, watching the screen, hoping for a notification. And when they finally do reach out, that massive wave of relief you feel convinces you that this is worth fighting for. If you are nodding your head right now, I want you to take a deep breath. Because you are not crazy. You are not broken. And you are definitely not stupid for falling into this trap. There is a reason this keeps happening. And it has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of self-worth or some fatal flaw in your personality. What you are experiencing is a deeply documented, well-understood psychological pattern. Therapists and researchers call it repetition compulsion. It is the invisible force that quietly guides us toward the very people who will replicate our oldest, deepest wounds. But here is the most important thing you need to hear today. Your nervous system is not doing this to punish you. It is not doing this because you secretly want to be hurt. It is doing this because at some point in your life, this exact pattern was the only way you knew how to survive. To really understand why you keep choosing people who cannot choose you, we have to go back. Not to your last relationship, but to your childhood. When you are a child, your brain does not have the capacity to understand complex relationship dynamics. It does not understand concepts like emotional availability. It only understands one thing: familiarity. To a developing nervous system, familiar equals safe. Even if that familiar environment was lonely, even if it was chaotic, even if it required you to be perfectly quiet, perfectly compliant, just to be noticed. Think about what that actually felt like for you. Maybe you grew up with caregivers who were physically present in the house, but emotionally distant. Maybe your feelings were routinely dismissed, minimized, or met with a heavy, exhausted sigh. Maybe you learned very early on that if you cried, you were too much. But if you stayed silent and managed your own emotions, you were good. In that environment, your brain mapped that dynamic as the absolute baseline for love. Psychologists refer to this as childhood emotional neglect. It is not necessarily about what was actively done to you. It is about what was missing. The attunement, the validation, the quiet reassurance that your inner world mattered. Because of this, your internal blueprint for love became deeply tangled up with longing. You learned that love is not a steady, warm presence. Love is something you have to earn, something you have to chase, something that is occasionally handed out like a rare reward for good behavior. So, let us fast forward to today. You meet someone new. And let us say, just for a moment, you meet someone who is genuinely warm, consistent, and emotionally available. They text you back promptly. They ask how your day was, and actually listen to the answer. They show up when they say they will. But instead of feeling relieved, your nervous system throws up a massive red flag. It feels boring. It feels suspicious. Your brain whispers, where is the catch? When is the other shoe going to drop? Because their consistency does not match your internal blueprint. But then you meet someone else. Someone who is a little distant. Someone who keeps you guessing. Someone who gives you just enough attention to keep you hooked, but pulls away right when you feel safe. And suddenly your brain lights up. It recognizes that dynamic. It says, yes, this is home. This is a puzzle I know how to solve. You are not consciously choosing to be hurt. You are unconsciously seeking out the familiar, because your nervous system mistakenly believes that if it can just navigate this specific type of distance this time, it will finally be safe. But here is the thing. Knowing that this is a childhood pattern is not enough to break it, because there is a second mechanism at play. A biological hook that makes walking away from these relationships feel physically, agonizingly painful. It is called intermittent reinforcement. In behavioral psychology, this is the most powerful way to condition a response. It is the exact same mechanism that makes slot machines so incredibly addictive. If a slot machine paid out every single time you pulled the lever, you would get bored. If it never paid out at all, you would walk away. But if it pays out just enough, and just unpredictably enough, you will sit there and pull that lever until your money is completely gone. You keep pulling the lever, telling yourself that the next time will be the one that changes everything. You convince yourself that your patience is a virtue, when in reality, it is just a trauma response keeping you anchored to a sinking ship. Emotionally unavailable people are human slot machines. Think about the dynamic. They pull away, leaving you in a state of high anxiety and craving. Your cortisol spikes. You feel desperate for resolution. You watch the screen, seeing the little typing bubbles appear and disappear, your heart rate climbing with every passing minute. Then out of nowhere, they give you a crumb. A sweet goodnight text. A sudden moment of deep vulnerability. A weekend where they act like the perfect partner. When that crumb arrives, your brain does not just feel relief. It floods with dopamine. Neuroscience shows us something fascinating here. The brain actually releases more dopamine in anticipation of an unpredictable reward than it does for a guaranteed one. This is called a reward prediction error. Because you did not know if the affection was coming, the sudden arrival of it creates a massive chemical spike. Your brain becomes chemically hooked on the relief of their return. You start to confuse this anxiety and relief cycle with passion or chemistry. But it is not chemistry. It is a trauma response. You are literally experiencing withdrawal and a hit over and over again. And this brings us to the hardest, most honest truth of all. When you are in these relationships, you are not actually looking for love. You are trying to rewrite history. This is the absolute core of repetition compulsion. It is the subconscious, desperate attempt to gain mastery over a past where you were completely powerless. When you were a child, you could not force your emotionally distant parent to see you. You could not force them to validate you or to love you the way you desperately needed. You were stuck. But now you are an adult, and your subconscious whispers a very seductive, very dangerous fantasy. It tells you that if you can just be patient enough, if you can just love them perfectly enough, you can make this emotionally unavailable person finally choose you. And when they finally do, it will prove that you were always worthy. You will finally fix the past. So you become the fixer. You over-explain your feelings. You make excuses for their behavior. You shrink yourself to fit into the tiny spaces they leave for you. You become their unofficial therapist, managing their moods so they do not pull away again. You pour all your energy into trying to decode their mixed signals, convinced that if you can just figure out the right combination of words, the right amount of patience, the lock will finally click open. But the lock was never there to begin with. You think you are fighting for the relationship, but psychologically you are fighting a ghost. You are trying to win a game that was rigged before you were even old enough to understand the rules. If you are recognizing yourself in this, I need you to hear this clearly, and I need you to let it sink in. The hypervigilance you developed, the way you learned to read micro-expressions and manage other people's emotions, that was not a flaw. That was a feat of engineering. A child, alone and without the right tools, figured out how to navigate a desert. You learned to survive on crumbs because that was all that was offered. You did what you had to do to survive. But the workaround has limits. It kept you alive then, but it does not have to keep you trapped now. You do not have to unlearn your capacity to love. You just have to teach your nervous system that it is allowed to rest. And this is where the real work begins. Because when you finally step away from the chaos, your body will not immediately feel peaceful. It will feel strange. When you meet someone consistent, your chest might feel tight. When someone respects your boundary without arguing, you might feel a sudden urge to pick a fight, just to return to the familiar tension. This is not a sign that the new person is wrong for you. This is your nervous system detoxing from the adrenaline of the chase. You have to sit with that discomfort. You have to remind your body that boredom is not danger. That silence is not abandonment. That consistency is not a trap. It takes time for the nervous system to recalculate what safety actually feels like when it has been running on high alert for decades. But every single time you choose a healthy boundary over a familiar chaos, you are literally rewiring your brain. You are building a new blueprint. Part of this rewiring process means you have to grieve. You have to grieve the fantasy that if you just love hard enough, you can change someone who does not want to be changed. You have to mourn the childhood you did not get, and the parent who could not see you. This grief is heavy, but it is clean. It is the pain of healing, not the pain of repeating. When you finally let go of the need to fix the past, you make room for a present that does not require you to shrink. You were adapting, and you did it remarkably well. But the war is over. You are allowed to put the armor down. If this explains something you have never been able to put into words, please share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Take care of yourself. Take a deep breath. You deserve love that does not require begging for its existence. You are worth the consistency you keep trying to give to everyone else. You do not need to earn your place in someone's life by tolerating their absence. You do not need to prove your value by accepting crumbs from people who do not know how to offer a full meal. The next time you feel that familiar pull towards someone who is emotionally distant, pause. Take a breath. Recognize that your nervous system is just trying to protect you in the only way it knows how. But you are an adult now. You have the power to choose differently. You have the power to choose yourself. Choose the peace that feels boring at first. Choose the love that does not make you anxious. Choose the life where you are finally truly seen. You have survived the desert long enough. It is finally time for you to come home to yourself.